Okay. All right, I hit record, so it should be going. Now we can officially pray. Was that your volunteer for the prayer, David, or no?
Yeah, I'll go for it. Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful to be here in this time and to have the technology needed in order to communicate with one another and to go over this case. We ask in this time to bless us with Thy Spirit, so that we may be able to understand this material and be able to learn from one another the things that we might have not been able to understand by ourselves. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. And please bless that Gabe will show up. Oh, look at that.
There he is.
Today's text.
I was here the whole time.
Whoa, Gabe, wait. Come on, Gabe. Show the shirt, guy.
The shirt.
Just so you know, this shirt was not planned by me. I asked my son to go grab me a shirt. This is what he came back with.
I honestly thought about it just as soon as I logged on. I was like, oh, man, I did.
I started this.
It looks like it's the right color though for Florida, so I got that going for you.
Oh, it's a Florida shirt.
Oh man, that's great. Okay, well, let's see here. So, does anybody want to do a quick kind of summary of the case? We're talking about Thomas Green and his whole deal. Does anybody feel comfortable enough kind of just going over it?
I can try.
Okay, go for it, Gabe.
So basically, they work for Something Dynamic. They make kiosks for self-check-in. And Thomas Green was this guy who was a up-and-coming sales rep in a previous company, and he knew the CEO of Dynamics, and they went to a very, very terrible school. That's probably why they failed.
That's it.
And so he was very inexperienced. He got a job hired by, I forgot her name, McDonald,
yeah.
And she took a big risk on him. He didn't really have any leadership skills, and he was offered a senior position for senior market or something like that.
Right.
And then when he got in there, he took over the person who was in his spot, who is now his boss. And they have very different styles of working. And so Frank Davis is Tom's boss now. And Frank was like, hey, the way that you're doing a couple things isn't how, I expect you to do them. And so their priorities are kind of different. There's a lot of emotion going on between both of them. Frank is upset with Tom, doesn't feel like he's prioritizing things and doing things as he should. And Tom thinks he is, and that the goals that they're setting are kind of ridiculous. And so he's kind of doing his own thing, and now he's in trouble because of Frank's emails. Yeah. I might have missed a lot, but.
No, that's great. Yeah. Okay, so perfect. You kind of led into that then. What do you guys think are like the main like problems in this case, kind of like the it says the key issues. What are the key issues of the case?
My thought for the key issue, I think it seems that there was not a communication between I just drew a blank on her name, Shannon, and between Frank. So I think in that case she should have told Frank, hey, I know this is not who you wanted. I had meetings with him, I kind of taken him under my wing. He doesn't have leadership, but I want you to step forward and help him in that. So I think there should have been communication there. And then I think Shannon could have the same thing told, the guy too, hey, Frank, is not happy of you. And I think she did tell him that, but tell him, hey, there's certain things you got to learn from him. Take a minute to learn. You're new in this role. So I think, and I did the write-up. My case study was kind of those points towards her that I think she would have told both of them the situation of what was going on. I think some of this back and forth and the fighting and, could have ended if if she would have stepped forward and explained why she picked him and what she saw in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think communication for sure between all the parties there. Yeah. Does anybody else?
So I got to ask everybody, when you started reading this, did you find yourself siding with Tom? And then the more you thought about it, did you shift from that, or did you stay firm with that?
I kind of felt like I didn't side with Tom at all.
Okay.
I felt like he was given ample opportunity and very clear guidance on what he needed to do. He might not have had the tools to actually do those things because he didn't have the managerial experience. But from what I saw, he wasn't even trying to do it. He was stubborn, talking behind his manager's back, wanting to do his own thing. And even in the meetings, he would say, I'm going to do this. Yeah, I see your point. And then he didn't do it.
But at the same time, too, one thing I noticed, he was told, bring some fresh ideas into this group. And so that may have been what he was trying to do, but I don't think anybody knew, hey, he had new ideas he was trying out. So I think kind of Terrell, I was actually on the first one, like, dude, this guy can't do it wrong. Yeah, he made some mistakes, not getting his calendar. I don't know what else, I forget, he had something else to do. Little things like that, but I did find my way. But I think you are right. There are some things that he needed to learn. Christy, you were right. I definitely think there were some things, but I found myself swaying back and forth. So that's why I put the blame on Shannon on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a good point. I felt bad for him as I started reading because I kind of thought the cards were stacked against him. Just because as you read, it just didn't seem like he was set up for success. But
Sure.
then as I continue to think about it, he really put himself in a terrible position too. While he may not have had a perfect opportunity for success, the chastising the numbers and talking bad to his team and others about the numbers. That was the one thing, the Outlook email or the calendar that he was using, and not being truthful on where he was and what he was doing. He was not in a great position. He was in a bad position to begin with, and he didn't help himself at all. He put himself.
I agree. I think there were some serious communication issues, and a lot of things could have been solved if they would have talked at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think there's also a generation gap where Frank came from a different era where you put things on the calendar, you do it this way, and Thomas comes in where maybe his generation doesn't believe in calendars. They don't believe in alarm clocks. They do things differently. So for them to try and work together and not seeing eye to eye on how to do things also caused some problems. I also think, I first sided with Thomas, and then I thought, if you would have just put where you're going to be, email him. If you're going to go to Florida and you decide to go to Georgia, shoot him an email or put it on the calendar. It's not that hard to do. So, but that one of my key points when I did this write-up was the generation difference, the way the old school did it and kind of the way the new school does it.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any key issues or anything they were thinking about?
I think it would have really helped if he would have shared those ideas that are in his head with the manager. Because
Yes.
the charts are in my head, and obviously he had this great idea. He was out on his special project, but he never shared that with Frank and let him know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of communication going on, and there's a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
And there's all this talk going on, but none of it's actually fixing the issue between the two.
Right.
They're just assuming, like in the very, very end, I believe Green was talking about how Davis was judging him based off of something, and he didn't know for sure why he was mad at him, but he just guessed that it was because of the board meeting.
Yeah. And he was out to get him. And
Yeah, out to get him.
what was the ending on that? Actually, he said something about that he was like trying to get his ammunition together or something.
Putting the case together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Think there's any correcting it at this point between the two?
Oof. That's tough. Wait, we'll get there. Everybody hold that. That's later on.
Why don't any of these companies have HR teams?
What's that?
None of these companies have like HR teams or like
Yeah.
resources for this stuff. They're all just like talking to managers and office politics.
I think we are the HR group.
I was gonna say we're the HR people.
Reminds me of the
Okay,
office.
so then without knowing what we know about the case, kind of, right? Would you guys have given Tom the chance if you were in Shannon's shoes at the time? Do you think you would have given him the job? What do you guys think? It's hard, like, because we kind of know what happens, obviously. But if you were back in that time, would you have thought it would have been a good idea?
I would have thought so, because I would have thought his personality, he seemed really enthusiastic and really dynamic. And so I probably would have thought that, oh, he's going to be willing to catch on and try, and because he just had that enthusiasm. But when he got into that particular position, he didn't have the enthusiasm for that job.
Right.
I wouldn't have done it without. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You go ahead. I've
Okay.
talked a few times. You go ahead.
I wouldn't have done it without like the way that she did it was kind of, she didn't involve Frank at all, and Frank he mentioned in the case was expecting to be a part of it, and she kind of went behind his back and just hired this person, whereas I would have consulted this person, Frank, being is that he knows the position better than anyone, and he knows exactly what's needed for that position and those type of customers and the customers they're dealing with. And so I wouldn't have done it the way that she would have done it. And I think that if she would have involved him, maybe they wouldn't have hired him right off the bat.
Right. Maybe Frank would have given his opinion sooner and changed it or something.
Mm-hmm.
One thought I was going to add too is I think that she could have maybe mentored him. Obviously, she found some stuff that she liked about him, and so she hired him. But it's kind of like she hired him and said, "Good luck, you're on your own." I think maybe she could have maintained that relationship and if she would have been coaching him along, maybe some of these situations with Frank may not have happened if she was coaching or helping him see the big picture, or yeah, you messed up, but let's work on this. So
right. So was it in this case? It might have been a different case from a different class that I'm taking out, remember? But I think she said something about like him having responsibility of looking for that guidance from like other managers. Does that ring a bell for anybody?
yeah, that's this one.
Yeah. Okay. So, because I feel like he probably didn't do that as well either. I think maybe, Terrell, you were saying something about that. Like he just didn't look for as much guidance and direction as he probably could have.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was, I don't know if it wasn't the case. I think it was from the supplemental reading that we had.
Maybe.
It's from the supplemental reading, yeah, using your networking.
Yeah, like knowing how to ask questions, I think, or I believe is what it was. People know how to be advocates. It was the other one that they didn't know. I don't have it pulled up, but I think that's, I don't know. That's what you meant when you said that.
Yeah, that might be it. So would anybody have just flat out not hired Tom? Does anybody have that opinion and would care to share, or would we all have given Tom a chance?
No, considering his educational experience, no.
So
I'd have hired him, no problem.
without any interviews, huh? Just
I did not. Yeah, absolutely. University of Georgia, you're in, brother. Let's go.
I don't think I would have. I think the reason she did so fast was because they went to the same university. They found all those commonalities that,
yeah,
that brought them together so fast, and they had
right.
all those similarities that she was drawn to him. And
Right.
yeah.
I wonder, is that the reason? I mean, because we really don't know the reason that she hired. So what is the reason? What is the reason she didn't have a discussion with Frank about it beforehand?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Is it because she knew that there was going to be pushback there, or was it, hey, it's my call and I've got to make the decision on? I mean, not to flex her muscles, but at the same time, it's her call.
Right.
She's got to make that decision. So
yeah,
I wonder what the reasoning is behind it.
Yeah, it's funny too that she even says like Frank's probably not going to be happy about this decision because he thought he was going to get it, but then you would think there would have been some sort of communication there with her and Frank, like, hey, I made this decision. Like, this is what's going on. But we kind of talked about that. I think is definitely one of the key issues.
Maybe she doesn't like Frank.
Maybe she doesn't like Frank.
I know that.
Well, that was one of
I kind of thought that same thing, but go back to read the email. I mean, she sided with Frank pretty quick.
Yeah.
You know, because Frank blasted him in an email, to her, and it's like she didn't. Obviously, she's trying to gather more information on it based on her response, but she took it and ran with it pretty dang quick.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
But of course, Thomas seemed to think that she was going to be on his side, so he thought he knew her pretty well, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're talking about Frank, actually, let's kind of paint a picture of Frank. What do you guys think are like his work styles or leadership styles? Frank, and then we'll do Tom, and then we'll kind of compare and see how they match up. What do you guys think about Frank right now?
He sounds like my boss. He has to be in everybody's business.
Yeah, I would almost say he kind of sounds like, I could see where you could think that he's probably a micromanager. Like the fact that he has to know his whole schedule and that he's watching the guy's schedule. I can understand if you need to know, someone on your team's important trips they're taking or stuff like that. But to me, it kind of like sounded like he's just sitting and watching people's outlooks, and see what they're doing. But I mean, maybe that's not the case. But I could see where that micromanaging kind of mentality, and I think it kind of stimulates from the whole. It was his position before, and there's a lot of emotion behind all of it. Emotion on both sides. Thomas wants to prove the world that he can do it without people's help, and then. And Frank is just emotional because, he's like, man, those are my clients. You need to take care of those guys. It's like missionaries when they leave an area and then another missionary comes in, you're like, don't mess it up, man. Like if they're inactive, it's your fault, So it's kind of like that as what I saw.
Yeah.
All right, that's a good point. Amen.
Yeah.
We just wrap up right there. I can just kind of end. Okay, yeah. I mean, you kind of covered both of them a little bit for Frank and for Thomas. Okay, so let's see. What kind of questions? Where do we want to go from here? Does anybody have any questions they want to kind of explore? We can keep moving along. I got like a list of things.
So, but maybe just really quick while you're doing that, to expand on Frank.
Yeah.
I have employees that report to me, and it's what's kind of funny. Some of the main things I do is I have to tell them, hey, where were you? Your calendar was blank. So I found a little bit of myself in Frank. Now, I don't go then sending nasty emails to my boss, but I have a conversation with him and say, hey, this is the reason why I need it updated. And when you don't respond to an email and it takes you 4 times to respond to me, then I start to wonder, what are you doing? Were you on vacation? What was going on? So similar to the point you brought up earlier, that's when I kind of started seeing a little bit of siding with Frank a little bit, where I didn't see him as such a bad guy. Maybe there were some things he could have said it nicer. He could have sat down with Thomas first and just had a discussion before emails started flying everywhere. But, I see from a little bit of Frank's point of view where I think he had the right idea. I think he just may have went about it possibly, the wrong way.
Right.
And again, with not really being able there to help coach or sit down with him, he just kind of snapped at him. So, that was wrong, but I see why he did it.
Right.
And say, I think he had good intentions. He just acted upon those intentions badly.
Yeah. It's exactly what I was trying to say. You always know what I'm trying to say.
That's true, even from last week. Way to go, Kelsey. We needed that.
I've got my 2 cents in.
She is there.
Okay, so let's go. We kind of were talking about this a little bit, kind of along the lines of like, where's the HR team in this situation? But so one of the questions we can kind of analyze is, how does power and office politics come into play? So like I don't know how you want to interpret that. How could this situation have been avoided or handled differently, I guess, if other people were involved, or if they went about it, in a different manner? If that question, I don't know if that makes sense, or if anybody has any comments with that.
Well, I don't know if Thomas was really trained on how to do the position. Frank had done this position for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure he expected this new guy to come in and do it exactly how he did it. I feel Frank probably thought he knew exactly what he was doing and his way was the right way.
Right.
And when Thomas did not do those things, it probably frustrated him.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder in the back of Frank's mind too, if he thought, man, if this guy really succeeds and does so much better than what I did at my job, he's going to make me look like a fool coming in doing a totally different style.
Right.
So I wonder if he was a little intimidated. But what was your question? Sorry, I started going off.
No, that was perfect. So that was good, Eric. Like, just kind of how that was more like the power in the business. Like, oh, this is how I did it, so it needs to be done this way.
Yeah, and we don't really get a background of how the company's set up, how the company's run, what their culture is.
Right.
We just see this new guy coming in and doing something totally different.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of cases we look at are kind of like that, huh? It's like, this is the situation, but then there's so many other little details that would influence how we look at it, but we don't really get those details a lot of times. But.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing that I think it was like a line in there. I'm wondering if it was more of maybe not as much power, but the politics side, because it sounded like when Tom was saying like, yeah, other people in the office agree, like other managers like him agree with what I'm saying too. Right. And so I'm wondering how much of it is split, and so I think I think a lot of that had to do with a lot of the problems just had to do with people were telling Tom something in one ear and he was hearing something different in another, and so I was causing some conflict, and I think he was just, I gotta stand my ground, especially when I have support from other people who agree with me, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good point about that.
I think one of the things with the power and maybe not knowing who has it was with Frank and Shannon, we talked about where he was hired, who hired him, or who has the power to hire him. Mm-hmm. That could be one of the issues of who actually had or has the power
right
in the office of hiring.
Yeah, and if toes were stepped on in that process too, which it kind of seemed like it probably was, but yeah. Okay, so let's go to what Tara was kind of hinting at. What now, right? Like, is the situation? Can we save it? Can they work around it? How would they go about doing that? What do you guys think?
I think earlier. I think if they all sit down and chit chat, it might be salvageable. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I think if they all sit down, at least that's a good starting point. Maybe it won't, maybe it will, but if they all three sit down, you never know.
That communication that wasn't there in the beginning can come about. What were you going to say, Christy?
I was just going to say that I think it would be really tough for them to do it, but like you said, if they all sit down together and they actually lay out, this is what we need from you, to Tom, so that he can actually implement those things, and he does implement them, then I think he can really prove that if his ideas are going to work or not. If he's doing the work and he still can't meet the quota, then basically he's proved himself right that the quota was unattainable, but they can't fault him because he's done everything that was asked.
Right.
But if he doesn't do it, then yeah, he's out.
Okay. I think that with the supplemental reading, they talked about the three things to develop a relationship, and one of them was to understand each other. I can't remember what it was, but basically if you provide like a suggestion, like say ask about the data behind it. And so I think both of them, Tom was wanting to do one thing and Frank wanted to do another. He's setting these goals, and I think they really needed to sit down and talk with each other and ask, okay, what's your reasoning for those goals and why? Like, I want to see the numbers behind it. And I think that helps kind of ease the situation, because then they're a little bit more understanding. It goes back to the empathetic listening thing from some habit that's in the book, but seeking first to understand, then to be understood, and you make your little deposits of emotion or something, and it's something like
Okay. So let's see then. Yeah, I think that's right. I think if they, just that communication is so important, that they all are on the same page and that they understand, because another questions, it kind of talks about what you think like Frank's goals were and what you think Thomas's goals were. And I think obviously they have the same goals for the company. They want to succeed and they want to be, effective and efficient and do things, productively, but they just have different styles of going about doing that, which is not bad. Everybody can have their own styles of doing things, but when people are, micromanaging, like we were talking about, and just not giving them the independence to do it their way and to see if it works even, then they're not on the same page and it doesn't work out as well.
I think their ideas of success may be different as well.
Yeah.
Based on the numbers that were presented, obviously to Thomas about what the company needed to achieve. Mm-hmm. He also didn't feel that they could achieve those goals. So, something like that, there needed to be a serious conversation with Frank and Tom at that point in time when the numbers were presented. I don't know if there was or was not, but it seemed like instead of having a one-on-one conversation about it, Tom decided in meetings to call him out on the numbers, which immediately Frank is going to have some resentment. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some bashing of heads at that point in time, and it did not. The professionalism just didn't seem to be there.
Right, but definitely puts a bad taste in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I noticed that all the rest of the managers didn't raise their hand or anything to call Davis out on the numbers. So it seems like it was just a green thing.
But didn't it say something about a lot of people were encouraging Tom to stand his ground on it? And
one of the other managers, yeah.
I question that too, because it doesn't seem like there was any conversation about it when everyone was together. Mm-hmm. But when they're all separated, then all these other managers are encouraging Tom to, hey, stand your ground, go after. Almost like you keep running your mouth, you're going to be gone. So do it.
Like, fight.
Yeah, exactly. Like, go, do it. You can do it. Come on. So I don't know if it was meant to be that way or what, but it's like, man.
Yeah. I wonder if it's because, so Tom kind of it talks about him being really charismatic and a really good people person, and he always likes to be face to face with clients and customers and stuff. And so I wonder if that maybe has a part in that, where he's able to talk to the managers, give his point of view really well. And then they're just like, oh yeah, that's great. Like, keep, stand your ground, like keep doing that. But then when he isn't able to like, schmooze people over or whatever he does, then his case doesn't look as strong or something maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you think about it, and we've got Tom out there talking to everybody about Frank. And then
Right.
Frank's just kind of in his own corner doing his own work. So, of course, people are going to get one side of the story and think that whatever Tom is presenting is the right thing.
Right. A little one-sided.
A little bit, yeah.
That, or maybe just kind of thinking maybe all the same managers have just never wanted to speak out against Frank. Maybe they're all thinking what Thomas is thinking. They're like, oh man, this guy's finally going to be able to be the one that can do it. We're all too scared. Maybe this guy will finally put him in his place. So again, we don't know all the details, but maybe they're trying to push him to be the voice of them. He's maybe the one with the backbone and the others don't. I don't know, because if all the others agree with it, maybe Frank is off and they're just don't know how to tell Frank. He may not be approaching.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe they think all Frank does all day long is look at his calendar. Wonder where people's at. Yeah.
Yeah, probably something like that. Okay, so let's do another little spin on it. So what are some ways that a manager in this situation could have been, or could be for the future, can be proactive in preventing situations like this? Like, what do you do? How do you set up that culture in your organization so that people, are on the same page, there's communication, like everybody's just working, effectively together? What kinds of things would have helped in this situation, or do you guys see in your work, or things that are effective to be able to make that happen?
I feel like they've said, or we've all said it a million times, have a conversation at the beginning to set the guidelines, because if you don't set guidelines, people are going to do what they think is best, whether it's along the same lines as what you would think is best or not, like we saw in the case study. So I just think the very first thing is set guidelines immediately. Expectations, whatever you want to call it.
Agree. And I know in the reading, the building effective one-on-one work relationships, one thing I noticed that stood out to me was when it talked about how are your relationships developing, and it tells you to ask yourself, what are your relationships like with them, meaning, like with your other coworkers or whatever, and have you even built the relationship in the first place? And these guys didn't build that relationship. So maybe if they would have started off getting to know one another and actually having a conversation before just throwing him out into the workplace, maybe that would have helped.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good. Because then that relationship will help them to care more about what's going on also, like to just be genuinely invested in what they're doing and their improvement and things like that. So I think that's really good.
It also makes them feel comfortable to come to you whenever they may be confused as to what the right thing to do, or is if they did something and someone confronts them, they can go to you and be like, hey, this person just confronted me for this. What the heck? Am I missing something in this company? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. So
seek out, be comfortable seeking out that guidance, and for sure. Cool. Okay, let's see. So another thing, it says we can kind of see what sort of gospel connections we can make to this case, or to any of the concepts or ideas that we were talking about. I don't know if you guys had any that you initially thought of while you were reading through it, maybe while you were doing your write-ups. I don't know if I was necessarily looking for anything like that. But one that always comes to mind for me, and what I always just try to do in my life in general, is putting myself in other people's shoes and seeing things from their perspective, and so I feel like generally if we do that, then we can be a lot more understanding and empathetic even, and just trying to understand things, even, the sequence of things, like understand their point of view first before even telling them your point of view, I think is really important. I guess it's kind of gospel related. I don't know. I think the church probably teaches.
Works for me.
What's that?
It works for me. Sounds good.
Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas about about that?
Only other thing I thought of is that we're all unique. We're all different. We do things different ways. That's not a bad thing. You know, if everybody was exactly the same, that'd be boring. So
Yeah.
we need to respect other people for the way that they do things if we have the same goal in mind. That's the only thing I thought about.
That's good. Thanks, Eric. Okay, so they have actually the kind of what happened in the end of the case. If you guys are interested, I don't know if you read that or not, or I can go ahead and read it for everybody if you haven't. So this is what it says. It says, after McDonald's February 5th, 2008 email, Green took the offensive against his boss. He crafted a series of memorandums, emails, reports, and projections that exposed inaccuracies and creative forecasting. This data enabled Green to build some alliances with other marketing personnel who used the data to ultimately side with him. On April 4th, it was announced that Frank Davis was being moved laterally to an undefined special project. However, Green's tactics were seen as overly brutal by many in the company, and although he won the battle against his boss, his career was irreparably harmed. McDonald distanced herself from him, and by July of 2008, Green announced he was resigning from his position to pursue full-time studies for an MBA. So that is what happened in the end.
Where was that at? I didn't see that.
No one won. Everyone lost.
Everybody lost. It's just a lose, lose, lose.
I mean, gosh.
Yeah. So that's in there's a link for the group meeting agenda. Yeah. So it's kind of the group discussion leader or whatever it would look at. It has like an outline of questions and stuff. Yeah. Which actually might be interesting. I might click on that in future weeks anyways, just to see what kind of stuff is there.
That's like cheating, you know, who wins the contest before.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, all right, that's cheating.
We would have had nothing to discuss.
We'll already have it discussed. Does that surprise anybody? What do you guys think of that?
That's a little surprising.
Yeah.
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no, because on his way home when he's talking, you know, in his head or whatever,
Right.
he does seem to be quite on the offensive, so I'm kind of not overly surprised.
Right.
I'm kind of surprised that he took the time to make charts and data, though, because that was not his thing.
Right. He was very invested in it.
That's why he wasn't reading his emails. He was making charts and data.
There you go. And get his boss fired, yeah.
Does anybody else have any thoughts about that? I was wondering, what do you guys think? Because so it talks about how he was overly brutal, and so his career was irreparably harmed. Like, what do you guys think that means? Just, yeah, how do you interpret that?
It's going to be looked at as he sabotaged his boss.
Yeah.
He didn't agree with him, and since he didn't agree with him, he did what he could to get him fired.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily fired. He got moved.
Right.
He got moved to an undisclosed
special projects. Yeah, whatever that means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be, well, if he'd have stayed there, it was always going to be tough for him to get respect from those above him and probably those who report to him as well.
Right.
I think he'd be viewed as a troublemaker, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't look good on the resume.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, everybody's probably just really cautious around him. Don't want to get on Tom's bad side, or he'll get a PowerPoint with the.
He'll get you assigned to a special project.
There you go.
Well, to me, this I think that the company or McDonald's didn't think very highly of Frank Davis. If they did that, if this guy that's been there for 17 years, they move him because this new guy comes in and proves a bunch of stuff. I don't think they respected Frank.
Yeah.
Apparently she didn't. Apparently later she didn't respect Tom either, because that last line was McDonald distance herself from him.
Right.
I mean, she may have had buyer's remorse on that, knowing, oh shoot, what did I do? You know.
He's like, nah, I'm done.
Yeah, and then tried to check out of it, and it's like, oh well, it's already done.
Right. Yeah. I don't even know how you would be able to, I mean, you distance yourself, I guess, but that's like the problem you created, I guess, in a sense. Like
it is. And it may not be a direct report, but there is some type of reporting that needed to happen between the two, and she distanced herself. Obviously, she didn't want to have that direct report. It had to funnel through someone else.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything that you guys are thinking about, wanting to discuss?
I think we covered it pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
You kind of said something, Gabe. What did you say?
I'll just say it was a good discussion.
Good discussion, yeah. Let's see. I'll look through real quick, see if there's any other questions that might be interesting. Kind of talked about politics and things, whether or not we could save the situation. Yeah, I think we hit it on the head. I think that communication is definitely the biggest part of why it didn't work out the way everybody was thinking. And I think if that was there in the beginning, it obviously would have saved a lot of time and hassle in the end. But then even throughout, they could have saved some stuff too. Okay. It kind of talks about conflict styles as well, and what the difference is there between, I guess, the three of them, Thomas and Frank and probably McDonald. McDonald seems like her way of handling conflict is to distance herself, I guess, which is not very effective in my opinion. What do you guys think of for Tom and for Frank as far as that goes, based on how they reacted in this situation?
Say that one more time. More time.
So kind of the way that they handled the conflict that arose. So how did Tom handle it? How did Frank handle it? How could they have handled it better? I guess, I mean, we kind of already talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, neither one of them handled it very well.
Right.
Very, very little to no discussion between the two.
Yeah, maybe even passive aggressively.
Yeah, I mean, Frank is running to the big boss, telling on Tom, and Tom's running to those underneath him or around him and telling on Frank. So there's no discussion in between the two.
Yeah, there's elementary school just running around.
The communication is going on in the wrong places.
There it is. So there is communication, but it's not the right communication.
Poor. Yeah, it's poor.
Yeah,
it's bad.
Well, cool. Yeah, I think we all have a pretty good understanding then of the case, of how things could have been better. I feel bad we didn't really go the full hour, but I think we got a pretty good discussion time that we did have together.
So good.
I think we covered it all.
Okay, awesome. Any last comments? Any sort of any beef that needs to get thrown down between blue and red over here, or?
We do our talking on the football field.
On the football field.
Hey, does anybody get any answers back on the whole 360 quiz? Do we know what we're doing there?
I hear no.
I'm wondering
I
if
haven't.
we should take that email where he split us into the two groups and just use those people as our peers.
That's an idea.
And there was
That's a really good idea, actually.
I thought the quiz was still broken. I started taking it, and when it got to those weird questions, I stopped and I emailed them and said, hey, this quiz is really weird. Is it still broken? and can you reset the quiz for me? And he said, yes, I will, and I'll let you know.
When it's or something.
Yeah.
Because I think, it's still, I think it's what it is just, groups of 5. So we're grading 4 other people. It just wants to know their name and if they're doing a good job. So I think if we maybe do what Kelsey's suggestion was, is when he split us into 5, we just pick, so-and-so's 1, so-and-so's 2, so-and-so's 3, and then grade those.
Do we all need to have the same people picked though? Because asks peer number 4, how did they do? And it's like, so we should all probably know who, peer number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I don't know. I think if we just put their name down, like say, Dallin, you, me, and Eric were in a group, and Dave, I guess 4, I could just call Dallin 1, call you 2, and then could ask for the name, and then so he'll know, Christy, you're 2, Dallin's 1. I don't know, but
I think that sounds
does
pretty.
it actually ask for the name in the quiz?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think if we establish the name and then go, I think we should be okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. That sounds pretty good. But if anybody hears anything else from him, I'm sure he'll make an announcement, especially if, Eric, you're saying the quiz is messed up and you can't even.
Well, yeah, that's what he said in his announcement, that something was wrong with it. Right. So he's extended the due date, right? So I've never heard back that the quiz is.
Yeah, he never said anything past that. He said it was messed up and the due date was now the 25th.
Yeah.
And you're right. He's never come back and said, hey, it's up and ready to go.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just get 100%.
Hey, there we go.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, we'll opt for that. Everybody, I vote yes. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have the list of names if you guys want them.
Oh yeah.
It's on Google Hangouts right now.
Is Dalton in our group still? He's not, right? Dalton?
Dallin.
Yeah.
It says, I know Dallin is, but it says Dalton on this. But, it says Kelsey, Ryan, Terrell, Gabe, and Dallin. I'm just going to put you in our group then.
It might have auto-corrected. A lot of times my name does auto-correct to Dalton. So.
Okay. That could be it.
Kelsey, Ryan, Terrell, Gabe, Dallin, Dave,
And then,
Catherine, Christy, Jeremy, Eric.
yeah.
Can we go through that a little bit slower? I'm not that fast at writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Is that what you're looking at, Kelsey?
How about this? Why don't we put it on that spreadsheet?
I already am.
I'll just
It's on
copy
sheet
it
5.
straight over there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Gabe's got it. Gabe's doing it. Good job, Gabe.
Boom. And
Dang, an idea out of Florida.
Catherine,
Hey, that
great,
Gabe fan over there.
Catherine, great job on pronouncing my name. You're the first and only one so far to say it correctly. So
Terrell, right?
nailed it. Yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah.
Terrell.
Did I say it wrong?
I don't know.
Oh, I said Terrell.
Yeah, that's right. You do. That's right. You do say Terrell. That's
I-
right.
I've said it wrong too. Guilty.
It's all right. It's okay. It's been
It's
30.
brotherhood.
That's their brotherhood.
Brotherhood.
My wife's sisterhood, right?
That's funny. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording too. I should have been
right.
that, but